Strickland! Fluffy is hurt.
Yo, before we get into this video, I need you to understand something real quick. Because most people watching UFC have no idea what actually happens to these fighters after the cameras cut off. Here's the thing that nobody wants to talk about. A study published by the American Academy of Neurology looked at over 200 professional fighters and found something wild. The longer a fighter's career, the more significant the brain volume loss. We're talking measurable shrinkage of the brain itself. And after 5 years of fighting, the damage becomes serious. After 10, it can be irreversible. No cap. And CTE, chronic traumatic encephalopathy. That's the real silent killer here. It's a degenerative brain disease caused by repeated hits to the head, memory loss, mood swings, depression, suicidal thoughts. And the most messed up part, you can't even officially diagnose it until after someone dies and doctors cut open their brain. So these fighters are walking around right now, suffering, and nobody can even confirm what's happening to them until it's too late. The UFC has had over 700 fighters compete at the highest level of the sport. How many of them are quietly dealing with brain damage at home right now? Fam, we genuinely do not know. And that's what makes this so terrifying. So today, we're talking about the fighters whose stories we do know, the ones brave enough to speak up, the ones whose families spoke for them. Stay until the end, because the last story on this list is honestly one of the saddest things I've ever researched, and it puts everything else in perspective. Let's get into it. Starting things off with Spencer Fisher, because his story is the most recent, the most documented, and honestly one of the most heartbreaking in all of MMA history. If you were watching UFC in the mid-2000s, you know who Spencer the King Fisher is. Lightweight fighter, fan favorite, the type of dude who would walk through fire just to give you an entertaining fight. He went to war 3 separate times with Sam Stout. One of those fights is literally listed in UFC's 100 greatest fights of all time. He won Fight of the Night honors 3 times. This man gave everything to the sport. Everything. And the sport took everything back. In 2013, Fisher was getting medically cleared for a potential return to the UFC routine stuff. But the EEG they ran came back abnormal, temporal slowing consistent with prior brain trauma. They ran a second one. This time, doctors found bilateral destructive lesions on his brain. Lesions, plural, on both sides. The neurologist's recommendation was immediate retirement. At 36 years old, Spencer Fisher's career was done, but here's where it gets real. Fast forward to January 2021. MMA Fighting publishes a full interview with Fisher, and the things he says are haunting. He talks about forgetting where he's going mid-drive, depression hitting him like a wave every single day, dizzy spells so bad he can barely function. And then he says this, his own kids, he had moments where he couldn't think of their names on the spot. His own kids, fam, that hit different. Spencer Fisher is now permanently disabled and unable to work. His wife Emily literally retired from her job just to take care of him full-time. His former opponent Sam Stout, the same guy he fought 3 times, started a GoFundMe for him because the financial situation got so bad. The UFC had been paying him $5,000 a month after his retirement, but when the company sold in 2016, those payments stopped. Dana White, when asked about Spencer's condition, said, "And I'm not making this up. He's not the first, and he's definitely not going to be the last. It's just part of the gig." Part of the gig. For real? This man can't remember his children's names, and it's just part of the gig. That response said a lot about how the sport views its fighters once they're no longer useful. At least Spencer Fisher is still here to tell his story. But Gary Goodridge? Fam, his situation is on a whole different level of sad, because the damage crept up on him so slow, he almost didn't notice it happening until it was too late. Gary Big Daddy Goodridge was a beast. UFC veteran, Pride, FC legend, K1 heavyweight. This man fought literally everyone. Fedor Emelianenko, Alistair Overeem, Pedro Rizzo, Mark Coleman. He was known as the gatekeeper of Pride because he would fight anybody, anywhere, anytime. That warrior mentality, that's exactly what destroyed him. In 2012, Goodridge went to see a top neurologist in Canada. The diagnosis came back: early onset CTE and dementia. His long-term memory was still sharp. He could tell you exactly what happened in a fight from 20 years ago. But ask him what he did that morning, gone, completely gone. A friend who co-wrote his memoir said he'd go on trips with Gary, and at night, Gary would ask, "What did we do today?" And he genuinely had no idea. But it wasn't just memory. The emotional side of CTE is what really scared the people around him. Goodridge said that without his medication, he would have ended his life. His words. He said he truly believed that if it wasn't for the pills he was taking, his life would have been done a long time ago. That's not a guy being dramatic. That's a man telling you he's fighting to stay alive every single day. What really got people worried was when Goodridge started talking about how he thinks the damage happened. He said he had 3 weeks in a row where he got knocked out twice. 3 weeks, 2 knockouts, and he just kept fighting because that's what fighters do. They get back up. Nobody told him to stop. Nobody protected him from himself. He says he has no regrets. And honestly, that might be the saddest part of all. And hit that subscribe button right quick before we keep going, because the next story involves one of the most famous names in UFC history, and the details coming out about his condition are genuinely shocking. Y'all, we gotta talk about Chuck Liddell, because if you grew up watching UFC in the early 2000s, Chuck Liddell is the UFC, the Iceman, former light heavyweight champion, first major star of the modern era, the man who helped put MMA on the mainstream map. So when his health started becoming a topic of conversation, the whole MMA community felt it differently. This wasn't just some fighter, this was the fighter. The real alarm bells went off in 2022 during his divorce proceedings. His ex-wife Heidi, in legal documents, made some deeply concerning claims. She stated that Chuck has CTE, that he cannot remember things, and that he gets stuck on his speech mid-sentence. She also said he's going to have dementia or Alzheimer's later in life, and that he suffers from terrible sleep apnea. Now, to be fair, these were claims made by an ex-spouse in the middle of a bitter custody battle. That context matters. But here's the thing, gang. If you've been watching Chuck Liddell clips online over the last decade, you've probably already noticed something feels different. The speech patterns have changed, the quickness is gone, and fans started noticing years before any legal documents surfaced. Liddell himself has pushed back, saying some clips circulating online were taken out of context. Fair enough. But Dana White actually forced Liddell into retirement back in 2010 after his 3rd straight knockout loss, specifically because he was worried about his health. And then in 2018, California cleared Liddell to come out of retirement at 48 years old to fight Tito Ortiz. He got knocked out in the first round. A lot of people in the MMA world were furious that the commission even allowed that fight to happen. Chuck Liddell deserved better from the sport he helped build, no cap. Now let's shift gears for a second, because not all combat sports damage is brain-related. Sometimes it's so physical, so visible, that it burns into your memory the second you see it. Chris Weidman, former UFC middleweight champion, the man who knocked out Anderson Silva twice, one of the most credentialed fighters to ever step in the octagon. On April 24, 2021, Weidman stepped into the cage against Uriah Hall. The fight started. Weidman threw a leg kick. Hall checked it, and then, crack, Weidman's leg snapped completely. The same type of break that Anderson Silva suffered against Weidman in their rematch. Almost poetic in a painful way. What made this moment so jarring was the look on Weidman's face. He knew immediately. He hit the ground, grabbed his leg, and you could see the bone just not where it's supposed to be. He underwent multiple surgeries, months of brutal rehab, complications, real talk. There were moments where people wondered if he'd ever compete again. He did eventually return, which showed serious heart. But injuries like that don't fully go away. Long-term structural damage, chronic pain, instability in that leg for the rest of his life. Y'all think about how fast things can change in this sport. One kick, one check, life altered forever. But in the case of Cory Hill, we're talking about a story that starts with one of the most gruesome injuries in UFC history and ends in a way that nobody saw coming. Cory Hill came up on The Ultimate Fighter Season 5, long, lanky lightweight, 6'4", which is absolutely massive for 155 pounds. He had this raw, exciting style, and people were excited about his future. And then came December 10th, 2008, UFC Fight for the Troops, Cory Hill versus Dale Hart. Second round, Hill throws a low kick. Hart raises his leg to check it. Their shins connect, and Hill's tibia and fibula both snap. Clean break. His foot literally flipped sideways at a 90-degree angle. People at ringside went completely silent. Nobody could process what they just saw. Even the fighters and cornermen in the building looked shaken. Doctors told him he would walk with a limp forever and never fight again. They put rods and pins in his leg just to hold the bones together. The recovery was 12 to 18 months minimum. Cory described laying in the hospital that night staring at his mangled leg, convinced his entire dream was gone. He said only the pain let him know it wasn't a dream. But here's what made Cory Hill special. He refused to accept that diagnosis. He went through 5 doctors who told him his fighting career was over. The 6th gave him a sliver of hope. He ran through rehab crying from the pain every single session, and he came back. January 2010, 13 months after that devastating break, Cory Hill won a fight by unanimous decision. Most people would have quit. He didn't. He kept fighting on the regional circuit, built a life, had a wife, Lauren, 3 kids, Cory Jr., Cedia, and Keenan. And then in May of 2015, Cory Hill got pneumonia. He underwent a lung transplant. The lung collapsed. He was placed on life support. His family made the hardest decision a family can make. Cory Hill passed away on May 15, 2015. He was 36 years old. His death wasn't from the leg break. It wasn't from brain damage. It was pneumonia. But his whole story, the injury, the comeback, the struggle, and then losing him that young, it represents something bigger about what these fighters go through. They sacrifice their bodies, their health, their futures for a sport that doesn't always take care of them when things go wrong. And that's the reality of this sport that most people watching the highlights on Saturday nights don't see. Gary Goodridge fighting to remember what he did today. Spencer Fisher's wife giving up her career to take care of him. Chuck Liddell's legacy now clouded by questions his own family is raising. Chris Weidman learning one kick can change everything. And Cory Hill, who beat the impossible odds in the cage, but couldn't beat what life threw at him outside of it. These men gave us memories we'll never forget. The least we can do is remember them fully. Not just the highlight reels, but the full cost of what they gave us. If this video opened your eyes even a little bit, drop a like and share it with someone who needs to see it. And speaking of fighters who paid a heavy price, I got another video breaking down UFC fighters whose careers ended in the most shocking ways possible. So click that video and I'll see you over there.